Okay, we'll just give it 2 seconds and we'll get going.
Cool.
All right, so welcome back to episode 5 of the What Is It Like To podcast, where we sort of dive into feats of and physical challenges that people have sort of conquered. My name's Andy, I'm the host. I head up Razor Performance, an online strength and conditioning service where I help people solve injuries, get damn strong, and help people with things like my man Rich is going to talk about today. Just to sort of caveat this, I didn't coach Rich for this. It was he did it off his own back. I used to I know Richard from my Roslyn Park days, where I was his fellow player, strength and conditioning coach, and all-round best buddy. So just during this session, we're going to be talking about a little bit about the race, the prep, the training, the nutrition, the safety, which I think is a really important thing, and the costs, and then what is it like to do what you did. So, Rich, do you want to introduce yourself? Tell us a bit about yourself, and then tell us what you did.
Got you. Thank you, Andy. So my name is Richard Boyle. Chartered surveyor, run my own business, doing bits and pieces in the property and finance world. Used to be a rugby player. Had a very, very brief professional stint at Newcastle Falcons, and then after that, Roslyn Park for quite a few years. I guess that's sort of me in a nutshell. I was a swimmer kind of way before at school, and never anticipated doing like a long distance swim, never planned on doing the channel swim, but it's kind of something that sort of I ended up doing at some point along the way.
So what made you decide to do it?
It's difficult. There's no one thing apart from my wife Lily sort of said you should do something like this. You need a challenge. Why don't you swim the channel? There's an element of kind of, she actually grew up in France, and so the channel between us, perhaps a bit of romance, but on that, I don't know. But yeah, I think neither of us, when I said, yeah, go on then, sort of stubbornly, neither of us quite had realised how impactful it would be in terms of what a big challenge it was, like even how long it was, and then how much training would go into it and how much it would dominate life kind of in the run up to that. But then also, I suppose, what a big kind of tick in the box it is in terms of, like, I'm really pleased I've done it. So I never underestimated it, but I did underestimate it, but I'm sort of really haven't underestimated it now. It's quite significant.
So just what was your sort of background in swimming? Because I think that's important for people. You were a decent swimmer when you were younger, or was it, what level did you get to?
I think going back to the reason so as well, I kind of didn't really point to that. She said I needed something because I finished playing rugby, and there is a massive hole in your kind of like social, physical, kind of just even just like emotional life. You need that kind of exertion, and I think you can't replace rugby at all. Which I've kind of sort of lessons learned. Swimming didn't replace it. Kind of swimming was the next best thing for me because I'd swum at school. We had like a reasonable relay team, but that was always about fitness for rugby. So the kind of the rugby teacher got like, you should swim. So we all went down swimming. We did all right. We used to like the Bath and Otter relays and stuff, but it's like utterly different to long distance swimming. So the max we would do was like 100-meter race, so 4 lengths of the pool. Whereas here you're doing like hours at a time in the sea. It's just like almost like 2 different sports, but the kind of the technique was there sort of in the bank, and I always kind of fell back to swimming. If I didn't feel fit the weekend on a Saturday for rugby, I would maybe do some swimming just to kind of like give myself a bit of blowout rather than doing running or anything else. I always kind of fell back to it. So fundamentally I could swim, and that was about it, to be honest. Sort of nothing much beyond that. I'd never done any long distance swimming, never really looked at it as a sport outside of rugby.
So I suppose, where did you start? What was the first thing? So right, you've decided to do this thing. Did you have any idea of how long it was going to take? I'm assuming you sort of looked into the distance, but what was the first thing? Did you have any coaching? Did you have a plan? What did you
I didn't dip my toe in. I literally like booked the boat. I got into almost like the admin of it before I got into the training. So weirdly, my old team secretary at work, her brother was the guy who ended up sort of coaching me. And I just kind of knew in the back of my mind that, oh yeah, Matt kind of organises channel swims, and he does that type of thing. So I sort of got in touch with her, who put me in touch with him. We talked through it, and he was kind of questioning me on my motive for it, because he'd come across lots of sort of like, bankers and stuff like that who did it kind of as a bit of an ego trip. and he was kind of grilling me on that, and it almost felt like a challenge in itself to sort of like go, no, I actually want to do this because I think I'm capable and I think it'd be a good thing to do. So fairly quickly, I looked briefly into it fairly quickly. Kind of what you need to do is book the boat, and almost like 18 months in advance.
Yeah.
And it's like a fishing boat. So I booked this fishing boat. I think it cost about 3 grand overall. Had to put down most of that money up front. So kind of book my kind of week slot. Week slot being because depending on what happened before, depending on the weather, you kind of never knew, and it ended up not being that date anyway. But that was it. It was kind of booked. And then you start going, okay, well, how do I train for this? And it's kind of the way I probably always do things. You get the goal sorted, and then you sort of back solve for how you're going to do it. But as I say, probably significantly underestimated how far it was and how long it was going to take on the day, how much training was required. But you kind of, I don't know, just took baby steps and went from there. Obviously,
Yeah.
I'd been swimming a little bit at that stage, but never with a view to swim the channel. It was just kind of one of those things that got suggested. I sort of stubbornly said, yeah, go on then. And then next thing you know, you book the boat. And I guess it's the thing I've said to people who talked about wanting to do it. If they genuinely want to do it, the next thing is just book the boat. And then you've got yourself a 12, 18-month target to swim for.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, where did you start? Was it just so what was your sort of first swim? How long was that?
I don't know. I think it was about 1K, which is kind of 40 length.
Yeah.
And the thing that I kind of had this conversation a few times with people is sort of, they would see on like Strava that I'd be doing sort of 5K before work or something like that. And it kind of, oh my God, I can never do that. And I genuinely think you could, because it's so quick, the increase from sort of blowing from maybe 10 lengths to then being able to do 1K and thinking, oh, that was tough. To then sort of going, okay, then do 1.5. And the next thing you know, you're doing sort of 5K sessions. And I think what helped was having someone kind of organise it slightly for me. So this guy, Matt Duggan at Red Top Swim, um, he sort of had a loose initially training plan. This is what you want to be targeting kind of on a weekly to monthly basis. And they were big, ugly numbers. Like I think I was easily swimming sort of like 50K a month by the end. And that just felt like so out of reach. But you do kind of quite naturally build up towards it. It just becomes something you do regularly.
Yeah. I mean, so I swim as well, not anywhere
Yeah.
near your distance, but same thing. A couple of years ago, I was in the same boat as you. I finished rugby, didn't have anything. I like to weight train, but other than that, I don't particularly enjoy running. The cycling thing just never really grabbed me.
Yeah.
And since sort of working from home, I actually quite enjoy like in the summer, especially going down to the lake and jumping in and swimming. And
Yeah.
also I think it's so nice to get away from technology as well. Like even when you're running, gymming and biking, you can still have headphones in, you can still have that stuff going on. But actually the swimming thing is just it's an escape, right? You get in, it's refreshing, it's an escape. But on your point, I think from my perspective, I don't know if it's the same for you, but with swimming, you do seem to be able to improve your distances quicker than running, especially. I found, I was the same as you. I went in first time, 500 meters and you're sort of dying, and then you start to get your pace. But after, I didn't train super hard and did like a 5K, and
Yeah.
that to me was completely alien. And actually, once you just get in and do it, you sort of your distances go up pretty
I
quick.
agree. And it's almost like strangely more rhythmic. You just kind of get on with it and go. And sort of setting yourself a target that's slightly more than you did last time is so achievable. Whereas I think sometimes with running, there is a threshold where you start to need to go and do, right, I need to do some gym work, I need to do some flexibility work, I need to do all these things. Truth be told, I didn't do a huge amount of kind of other stuff other than just like, and this partly kind of because of COVID, the pools were closed and everything else. So all we could do is swim in a lake for hours or swim in the sea for hours.
Yeah.
But actually, I don't think there's much more to it sometimes. You can overcomplicate it for sure. And I think that's probably, we'll maybe come on to that in terms of lessons learned and that sort of stuff. But I don't think you need to overtrain. I don't think you need to overcomplicate this type of thing. It's more kind of in your head. And yeah, going back to your point, it is nice to get away from technology, and there's nothing else you can really do other than swim. The flip side to what I found with that was that there's nothing else other than you and your thoughts.
Yeah.
And you can go to some really kind of weird dark places when you just swim for hours and hours and kind of, yeah. But yeah, the
Just
whole
quickly
like,
on that point, actually,
yeah.
what I found is when you first start out, you're thinking about technique, right? So you're thinking, should I be doing this? Am I doing this right? Am I
Counting stuff, yeah.
once you start getting a bit better, that's when you start thinking about other things. And actually,
Yeah.
funny enough, me and my mate had this conversation. It was he was like, God, I'm thinking about work. you know, and
the
he's
whole
like,
time.
I'm here to be away from work, you know,
Yeah.
and actually when you, like I say, when you first start out, you're thinking, well, maybe my hand should be here, maybe I should be doing this. And when you get good, actually, you start to think. So yeah, you're probably right. There's
Well, I
an
think
up
for
and a
me that the
downside to it.
technique was to an extent in the bank because I'd done it at school and lots of swimming. So it's kind of just dusting off what I was meant to be doing. And I did have to adjust for kind of open water swimming. So there was a few different technique bits which I concentrated on for a while, but it became quite automatic quite quickly. And then the whole time when I was doing it, so I swam in September 2020, but kind of the training was really amping up around March 2020 when the lockdown started and everything else. Weirdly, work got really, really busy. There's so much going on. It was all quite a weird time. And so you're just there trying to get away from it all, and yet all you're doing is thinking about work. Like all
Yeah,
you're doing is thinking about all the other stuff you got to. We were doing up a house at the same time. It was, to be honest, some of it was a bit of a nightmare actually. When you're just getting into, we were down in Devon for a lot of it. You kind of dragging yourself into the sea. I always feel good after being in water, whether it was a bath, it was a shower, the sea, pool, whatever. Like I always feel good having done it. But that bit in between, say you're swimming for an hour in the sea in the cold, there was some times where you're like, I know I've got to get back to the desk. I know I've got to do this. You know, so almost like taking yourself there already.
yeah. And did you get any technique advice? Did you get any extra
Yeah,
coaching technique wise? And if
a
so,
little bit.
what? Yeah, and if so, was there any sort of really key points that you focused on, like that you think really helps? Because I think for swimming, especially, I think technique is a huge thing. And I
Yeah.
often say to triathletes who I train and even swimmers, I would say, I would say go and get some advice from a coach because actually, the first time I went to a swimming lesson, he basically I swam like I did in school, like aggressive, really
Yeah.
fast, really shoulder based. And the guy just said to me, "You just took 14 strokes to get to the end of that pool." He said, "If you're open water swimming or distance swimming, you need to take six." And
Yeah.
even things like that, I mean, that's a very basic point. But I've had a couple of lessons since, and I feel like if you can get a couple of lessons early and just iron out those things and get some advice on how you make things more efficient, especially for swimming, it just makes you
Yeah.
loads better. So, was there any key
I think
bits for
that
you?
was it. Yeah. There was kind of I got an early kind of check in. I think we went down to the Olympic pool at Stratford with Matt and he was kind of saw how I swam. He's like, right, you're capable of swimming, but here's how I think you should tweak the technique slightly. And for me it was about like reducing that stroke count, not just to make it easier, but also to limit injury. You know, if you're gonna then swim for 12 to 14 hours, you know, if you can reduce that from 14 to 6, you're actually kind of over halving the amount of times your shoulders are turning over during that time.
Yeah,
And so that's kind of half less opportunity to tear something or whatever it might be and all the training that goes into it. And so I concentrated on, and it's a bit counterintuitive, but when you're swimming like and racing, you're sort of reaching out and you think if you wanted to take longer strokes, you'd reach out further. But actually I was told to put your arm head right down, so perpendicular almost to the water. So you're looking at the bottom. That helped my legs kind of come up because otherwise I was normally just dragging them like that and then arms straight down because anything that you're pulling from sort of here to here is almost like over exerting yourself. It's kind of wasted energy, but anything you're pulling from here to here is really kind of propelling yourself. So straight down and pull, and that meant that glide and kind of yeah. There's a couple of techniques out there, but kind of I think it's called the ocean walk technique. Is very much like that. It's a case of kind of um. Sorry, my dog's just been sick.
oh,
Um,
lovely. Nice smell for the rest of it. Well, mate,
yeah.
I said this is going to be a spit and sawdust podcast, so don't worry about
Unbelievable.
it.
Unbelievable. It is spitting sawdust. It really is. Good girl. There you go. Yeah, I mean, it was kind of literally about kind of gathering kind of that momentum. So fewer strokes, more efficient strokes, and kind of almost getting your hips so you're more kind of aquadynamic. Is that the right word? Um, and that was it really. And I think once I'd had that kind of intervention, I then went away and focused on it, and I could see results straight away. You know, you have the kind of Garmin watch and all the stats you get. So your SWOLF and your kind of strokes per length they were dropping and my speed was increasing. Like perfect. So
Yeah.
basically, fewer revolutions. Probably the wrong. I always thought it was revolutions, but you know, turns of the arm, fewer of those, higher speed, and ultimately you can swim for longer. That felt good to me. So that was all I was trying to do.
And do you think you said you didn't do a huge amount of like weights or injury prevention stuff? Do you think that? Well, firstly, what did you do?
Hmm.
Secondly, do you think your rugby background served you well? And the reason I asked that is I think rugby, builds your body to be fairly robust, right?
Yeah,
Because you've got to take tackles and stuff like that. So I just wonder whether you think that robustness from rugby training helped, or whether old injuries sort of came about, or
we work off the basis that I was robust, which I wasn't particularly. But yeah, it must have done. It absolutely must have done. So I think there was, again, as much as we'd have joked about kind of my physique at the time and that type of thing, and even now, there must have been some kind of money in the bank in terms of weight training and things like that, which, you do get a lot of people in long distance swimming or swimming generally, or people attempting the channel who've never done any of that. So I was kind of lucky to have had that background. Um, I didn't do much in the way of weights because I couldn't, because all the gyms were closed because of COVID. Um, I think lessons learned, so most of our kind of cohort that year swam slower times than other years, because most of those people would be in the pool, in the gym, doing more like speed type training, and their muscles were developed in a different way. So that actually they needed to get used to open water swimming, and that was more the battle for them. Whereas for me, it was kind of keeping the pace up because we were just plodding along the whole time.
Yeah,
I think if I had my time again, I would do more in the way of kind of specific weights work and almost replace a swim session for a weight session. Because I think, I mean, I probably did less than I was advised to in terms of miles swum. And I still probably would do less again if I was going to do it again. I just don't think you need. So when you train a marathon, that they recommend you run, say, like 20 miles max for a
yeah,
24-mile race, 26-mile, whatever it is. If you're going to swim the channel, the kind of minimum buy-in is about a 6-hour swim. So that's kind of less than half the time it took for me to swim. And they were like, "Yeah, you're fine. You'll breeze it now," sort of thing. So it's clearly a slightly different approach. And I think some weights training, I didn't suffer from any injuries, luckily, but I think you probably need to spend a fair bit of time doing that kind of resilience stuff around the joints,
yeah.
as well. But I think I got quite lucky. But I was kind of quite good at not training effectively. I didn't never overtrain myself, and
Yeah.
if I felt any niggles coming on, I just took the foot off the gas. Because you can't really afford. I think the big difference between, say, rugby and other sports like that, where you've got like a weekly fixture and Tuesday training, Thursday training, and those check-ins the whole time. I didn't have any of that. It was just literally swimming in September. If you cock it up, then that's it. Are you going to do it again? Not sure.
Um, and do you think, like, just so the audience know, they probably can't see, but you're a tall guy, 6'6".
Yeah, probably now. I used to be 6'7". I actually think I'm shrinking.
Yeah. Does it help or hinder? Do you think? Do you think your sort of physique has helped your swimming?
I think it's
Because you
got to
got
have helped. Yeah, yeah. I
yeah,
mean, I kind of recently joined up with a swim group, just more for like some sort of organized training, and we did like a race the other morning, and it reminded me back of when I was at school, where just because of the length of my arms, I look like I'm swimming really slowly, but I'm actually kind of swimming reasonably quickly.
yeah,
And I think that's got to help in terms of going back to that number of strokes versus speed thing. If you can kind of reduce the amount you're turning your arms, then you're limiting injury, you're kind of conserving energy to an extent. So I think it helped. And it's just leverage as well. It's science. It's kind of the longer your arms are, the easier you pull it.
um, mate, absolutely, science. Um, so with like leading into it, you obviously had. Did you have a nutrition plan? And if so, what did you test it?
So for the actual swim itself, I was
What, yeah,
given a nutrition plan.
yeah,
I think for the training bit, not really, but I kind of knew enough from sort of the rugby days to know what to put in. I kind of wasn't sort of naive to what I needed to eat if I needed the energy, but I mean, you're burning that many calories that it was just literally just seafood diet type thing. You just literally eating as much as you possibly can. I mean, I ate a lot of fish and chips. And I mean seafood as in like the seafood and eat it, ha. But that it was kind of, I was by the sea a lot. I was eating fish and chips in between meals. I was having like fish and chips and a battered sausage, sort of in between lunch and dinner. It was, for me, it was just calories. Like, I didn't get in particularly good shape, sort of like aesthetically,
yeah,
but you almost couldn't afford to be sort of at a low ebb from an energy perspective if you're then going again to swim another hour the next day and stuff like that. So there wasn't much of a plan, albeit I think I kind of in the back of my mind I knew roughly what I was doing food wise. And then the thing that what I left in someone else's hands was the nutrition on the day, and that was kind of gone.
But did you test? So the nutrition on the day was just. Did you test that? So on your
Yeah,
6-hour swim, for example, you tested
yeah,
that
exactly.
to check. I just think that's a really important point. I think a lot of people miss out on. You have a nutrition plan, but you don't test it, and I think a lot of people struggle with. People I speak to a lot have gastrointestinal sort of stress from the race when they
Yeah,
just haven't done enough in the lead up, and I think that's just a really important point. But on your point for calories, again, I think with when you're doing stuff like this, when you're training for you're doing huge long runs, huge long swims, you sort of need to cover off, you know, enough protein, you need enough vegetables, you need
Yeah.
enough water, you need the good stuff to start with as a base. But after that, it's a numbers game, right? And that's what I suppose that's what you're talking about with the fish and chips. It's like, okay, well, I've had my 2.5, 3,000
the building
calories
blocks.
from nice healthy food and had my fruit and I've had my veg and stuff like that. But I need 8,000 calories.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes it's just that people think eating well and nutrition for events is clean food, and while all that's valuable, you can't eat as much as you would have needed in clean food to get to that amount of calories. So it gets to that point where you just like, I just need to get this amount of numbers in. So after that, I need to tag this on, and an easy way of doing that, like you said, is high calorie food. Fish and chips.
Exactly.
Typically bad food.
Yeah.
Pizza, stuff like that.
But you always know you burnt it. It was very measurable because, like, I kind of knew once I got to a certain point, I was burning about 1,000 calories per hour of swimming. So, for example, the morning I did the 6 hour swim, I knew straight after I'd burnt 6,000 calories. So, like, where are you going to find that? That's on top of your then normal, and there's probably a bit of a runoff after that in terms of post swim. So yeah, there was times where it was just about getting volume in. Going back to your point about testing nutrition, like if we hadn't have tested it, I would have definitely capitulated. So they were the guys at Red Top Swim that I did it with. They organised the sort of I think it was weekly. They would have a session down at Dover, which I went to every now and again, and it was good to kind of go and do it with them because they basically have the drinks ready. You sort of swim a lap of Dover Harbour, and they sort of lob a bottle in for you, kind of trying to replicate in some way what you're doing on the day. And they sort of then asked for feedback and stuff, and sort of said, yeah, it's good. I sort of got a buzz from it, like a boost, but it would disappear quite quickly. And we quite quickly realised I needed about, and maybe it's back down to the size thing, but I needed about almost a triple dose of this kind of like effectively Lucozade without the salt, because you don't need it because of seawater. But I needed kind of a triple dose of that. And so we got me up to a level where they were sort of like, really? And I was like, yeah, can we try a bit more? And then I was absolutely fine. I knew for that, I think it was every half an hour. I knew for that half an hour I was good, and you were just feeling slightly depleted by the time the next drink came. But if we hadn't tested it, I'd have been running at effectively a third capacity, so I'd have probably failed.
Yeah, and I think that again on that point, there's research out there which suggests certain numbers, but people are different. Like and on episode 1, the guy I talked to did a 24-hour row, and we tested his nutrition like weekly, and it I thought it would be higher than we got to, but he just couldn't cope. He was in a rowing position, his stomach was crushed, his guts just couldn't cope with it.
Right.
So we got to a point where we hit the maximum, and that was it. And I think that's really important. It's not a one size fits all, and it's got to be tested.
There was something interesting which came up, and it wasn't a problem for me, but there was others in kind of the group that basically I think I did like either 3 or 4 different drinks on rotation. And it was kind of more to keep the sort of the mind ticking over and swim, which I guess we'll come on to, and sort of look forward to like the Ovaltine, which I had later on, and stuff like that. But some people couldn't deal with certain tastes while they were swimming. So that was all quite an important thing as well, because if suddenly you're then getting force fed something you just simply don't like, that's going to be dominating your thoughts while you're actually either wanting to be switching off or focusing on technique or whatever it might be. So that was important for them, just to try out all the different things and not go in. There's so much that's new on the day in these challenges. You want to limit as many surprises as possible. And I had loads, and I kind of, if I'd done it again, if I were to do it again, which I won't, there's so many different things I do. Like it was horrendous. But at least I knew the kind of nutrition side was effective, and I was looking forward to it.
Okay, well let's sort of move on to the swim then. So for the day, safety wise, what do you need? What equipment do you need? And who did you have with you?
Yeah, so I mean the big thing. So going back to booking that boat, the reason you book a boat is kind of one, so it's an official swim and it's done under one of the 2 organisations, but 2, absolutely for safety. So I basically swam next to this fishing boat the entire way. Some people will recommend kind of going from one side to the other, so you sort of changing which way you're breathing. I literally breathed left the entire time, and I swam next to the boat. And if I veered off away from it, they'd sound the hooter, and I'd kind of realise I have to come back. They navigated the tides so that I literally just followed the boat, because I think we've all heard the story about the bloke who tried to swim and end up back on the same shores, washed back. But I think
what happened to him? What mistake did he make? Just he tried to do it on his own?
Yes, basically. And I don't know how the kind of the boat navigating the tide, they protect you from a bit of the kind of, you know, the more impactful stuff, but ultimately you are on your own, but you're following a boat which is navigating the tides. And if you're going really quickly, you can swim almost in a straight line across it. But as you slow down, the tides take you significantly. And I can send you a picture of my route, or it's on my Instagram, but it was almost a straight line for a bit. Then I got taken north, northeast, and then back down southwest, almost like back on myself, and then back up again. And if you try and kind of just tackle that on your own, you're not looking where you're going. You can't. You need to be swimming and going forward. The tides will almost take you backwards and wash you into the middle again. So that's basically what happened with him, I think. And it's what would have happened with me if I didn't have someone navigating appropriately. They're almost kind of plotting the course based on your speed.
Mm.
So that really in terms of safety. And there were, you know, I swam the majority of it at night, so I had lights attached to me that sort of flashed, which is great. I think there's anything else in the way of safety because they kind of took care of it all, and really the role of the guys on the boats, and they're sort of fishermen for the rest of the year, I think, but they do this every year as well, so they can see when people are flagging to an extent. I mean, they didn't know me or what I kind of how I reacted to things, which bothered me, but they if they think you're going to be in any danger, they'll take you out, they'll call it, and so that's to kind of, I guess, there's so much riding on these things personally or kind of mentally that sometimes people don't give up to their detriment. And so actually sometimes someone else needs to make a call and that's their role in it to sort of adjudicate effectively.
Okay, so day of the swim.
Yeah, or night of the swim. I mean, it dragged on for a little while. So I was one of the last swims of the season. So you get like a sort of a week slot. And it was kind of middle of September. There'd been bad weather, so lots of the other people had been delayed. So it kind of pushed my date back and back. And then yeah, it's a pretty nervous wait. You're kind of like ready to go, and it's a bit like kind of those game day nerves, but it's the only game you're playing that season or whatever. So you kind of you can't afford to cock it up. And eventually just got a call after a few false starts of saying, yeah, we're not going today, the weather's not good, or whatever it might be, saying, I think you might be going tonight. Are you comfortable swimming overnight? And I'd never swum in the dark before. And there was like the opportunity to go and swim in the dark, and I would think I was busy. I can't remember why I didn't do it. But I was like, well, you know, if I can't swim basically the reason I couldn't swim kind of in the early morning, kind of going through the night into the morning, was because the storm was coming in, which turned out to come in a bit sooner. But they just wouldn't have let me swim in those conditions. So I had to swim at kind of, I think I started at 9 p.m. So I drove down. I was living in London at the time, so it was an hour and a half. Meet the boat in Dover Harbour. It's dark by that point. You're literally stood in your speedos on a fishing boat going around to a beach called Shakespeare's Cove, or I can't remember what it's called now. God, it's funny how like you don't remember half these things. But yeah, you literally kind of, I was wondering what I was doing there. I sort of think I never actually wanted to do this. And it's now nighttime in autumn because the air outside had got colder than the water as well. So it's kind of starting to get a bit blustery, a bit miserable. You realize you can be swimming all night. And that was it. You just kind of had to do it at that point. So jumped in the water, swam back to the beach because the boat didn't take you all the way there. They then sound a hooter. I sort of looked around left and right. There was a few other people doing it around the same time, which was a bit of an odd experience because you couldn't really see them. There was just flashing lights everywhere and hooters going off. And so I just kind of jumped back into the sea and swam. You swim to the boat. Yeah, and that was it. And you just buckle in, swam to France. Yeah.
So in fact, where should we go? So overall, it took you
13 hours and 3 minutes, I think.
13 hours and 3 minutes. And what was was there some sort of, in fact, how did they feed you first?
Yeah, so every half an hour they chucked in a bottle with a warm drink in it on a string. If I'd have touched the boat, it would have been disqualified. So it was just making sure I kind of got it. You literally swam. I just like kicked on my back, drank this thing. And it was like sort of initiation. There's like fishermen yelling at you in the dark while you're downing drinks. Kind of you're there doing it with your left hand just to make sure no one gets you with the old buckle and that. But it was ridiculous. Like it felt so intense. And sort of going back to my point around how the guys on the boat didn't sort of know me and sort of how I react to things, I just felt like I was swimming at night in the cold, just never met these guys before. It was all quite like bizarre, a lot coming at you. So I was having these drinks, which is probably like 300 ml every half an hour, warm kind of sugary drinks. So one was like a specific, almost like swimming sports drink, basically like Lucozade without salts. One was ginger cordial, which is delicious. and it kind of just helped with your mouth with all the salt. One was Ovaltine, again delicious, and then I think there's another one which I can't remember. Um, but you're putting all this liquid into you, and it was the fishermen were like yelling at me the whole time, like, keep swimming. Every minute you're treading water here is like you'll be going with the tide, and it'll put hours onto your swim. Blah blah blah. Normally, I was used to weeing during this kind of then that moment where you have a drink, kind of get rid of the bad stuff, of the of your wee, and then you carry on. And then especially, I kind of found once the seal had been opened, I could pee while I was swimming. But basically, got about five hours in, and I was like really flagging. Like, and I knew I'd swum 6 hours before, and I'd actually done that on a hangover as well. So I was kind of just like, I know I'm capable of this. Why am I feeling so bad? And it's because I'd been putting all this liquid in, but hadn't weed, because it was just this like avalanche of people yelling at me and in the dark, um, and I just had to tell them to shut up for a second. Like, I just need to wee, and did it. And after that, everything just kind of was fine. And I kind of knew by that stage I was going to be okay. And so you're kind of then looking forward to the half an hour stops and sort of could almost like time it in your head. But there was that weird moment, so 5 hours in, like, I'm gonna stuff this up here, and it was because I was just poisoning my body basically, because all the sort of the bad stuff in your urine wasn't leaving the body, and you're just filling yourself up. So that was a bit of a weird one. I think that's the kind of bit where you just don't plan for things like that. Anyway, I kind of got off course in terms of what we're eating, but that's what I was eating. Every half an hour drinks, just downing drinks and trying to do it as quickly as possible before then swimming on. And again, going back to the whole that I didn't practice swimming at night, that's kind of one of the things that they did as a training group. They practiced having these drinks while swimming, which wasn't an issue. Like, I wasn't kind of overwhelmed by the fact I had to tread water while drinking, but it was kind of with everything else going on, I kind of just forgot to wee, and that's quite an important part of it, really.
Yeah. So would you say that was sort of the first sort of mini low of the swim, the 5 hour?
There was only
of it?
two. Yeah, it was kind of because I think you're sort of so basically I switched off for like 27 minutes, and then you sort of see movement on the boat whilst they're preparing the drink, and you go, okay, fine, that's another half an hour. So I've been going 2.5 hours now. That's good. But I started to really flag, and kind of once I'd kind of realised why and weed, it was all fine. And then the next low was kind of in my head. I think I checked what time sunrise was going to be around Calais, hoping I'd kind of be nearly there by that point. So I knew in my head, right, I've done X amount of half an hour, so I'm call it 8 hours in. The sun should be rising, and you sort of have your drink and look around, and the sun never came up. It was like a miserable grey day. I apparently we could see front of that, but I couldn't see it on water stuff. You can't see anything. I was just like, God, like this is hard, like really hard. And I think there was a couple of those moments where you just like you kind of can't really give up. And I think I remember seeing there's two things. I remember like one weirdly thinking about like my parents' friends who donated, and my parents have to tell them like, oh yeah, Richard, thanks for the donation, but he failed. You wouldn't be able to kind of live with that. So you're like, well, I've got to get on with it. And then the other bit in that second low, kind of when we were in the morning, but never really became morning. Um, I was just like spoke to the guys and was like, look, your mood's changed. Tell me why, like what's going on. And I just needed information by that point. They were like, look, if you can pin your ears back and swim here, you'll get there in this time. If you don't, you'll miss that next tide change and you'll add 4 hours onto it. So I was like, oh, brilliant. Right. I've just got to like, dig in now. But it was kind of that communication I needed. I just wasn't getting any of it.
Yeah.
But maybe a bit of over communication wouldn't have helped either. It's just kind of, you never quite know. But
Well, it
those are
goes
kind of
back
the
to
two
that.
major moments.
Yeah, it goes back to them sort of knowing you. I think that's, I think some people are just quite analytical, or they just want to know. It's like, tell me what I need to do, I will do it.
Yeah.
But for some people, probably telling them that would make them nervous,
Well, I
or
think
sort of
the
send the
majority
spiral
of
in the other
people
way.
wouldn't react well to that. So their view, based on their experience of seeing swimmers, you don't need to know. You just need to keep swimming. Whereas, it's not that I could like turn up a gear. I mean, I must have done, I suppose, but I just kind of needed a bit of information to kind of help me along the way. You could see very clearly every time you're sort of breathing less, you're seeing people on the boat, and you're kind of judging their mood, and it had changed. And they were sort of rushing around a little bit and sort of watching me as like, right, tell me what's changed from your perspective, because I'm really tired. I'm just swimming, and I can't just keep swimming. Tell me more. And they did, and it kind of kicked me into gear a little bit. And I don't know if you've seen the videos. They kind of think I saved the. So my wife Lily was on the boat, and she filmed it all. Poor girl, she was pregnant as well at the time. She's puking overboard and stuff. The whole thing was wild.
Surely.
But you could see at the end, my arms are barely, they're just flopping over one another. You're not swimming particularly quickly at the end of it, but you do go. And I just needed that boot of the arse just to go, okay, you're almost there. just don't leave anything in tank, and you'll get there. You'll
Yeah.
get there pretty well.
Did you have to like adjust anything during the swim? Like, was there any like what adjustments did you need to make, or is it literally just head down and
It's head down. Yeah, I mean, you sort of just go into yourself, I think, and I think you let the rest take over. I think that kind of weeing, making sure you're kind of actually processing fluids, that was something I'd just forgotten. Um, yeah, the rest is just it's all mental by the end of it. Like I think when I've spoken to people about this, they're sort of like, "Oh, I think I could do it." It's like, if you think you could do it and you want to do it, go and do it. If you've got any desire to do it, because it's actually the rest of it is just mental, that kind of grit. The technique bit takes care of itself during the hours of overtraining you'll probably inevitably do. Um, and so yeah, there wasn't really any adjustments and any kind of major overhauls I had to make during it. It was just kind of getting on with it.
what? So just before we get into sort of lessons learned, with like, how was the weather, and how good does it need to be for you to sort of go ahead with it?
The weather was dreadful, and it was borderline kind of not swimming weather. But so basically, the reason I didn't swim the morning, like I say, was because the storm was coming in. That storm had come in by the time I got there. So if you think about what I'd planned, I thought I was going to be swimming sort of August, early September time, imagining kind of sun on my back, landing on a beach. Basically, if you land on the beach, you plan on there's this really nice kind of seafood bar, and they give you a glass of champagne, and people sort of high five you on the beach, and it's sunny. And the majority of it you swim in the daytime. I swam the majority of it at night in what felt like autumn, and landed in a storm on a cliff. Like literally climbed up onto a rock, and it's just
So
like
tell us about that.
none of it was, and whilst just being yelled at by fishermen, like it was just none of it was as I expected.
The
So
romantic side was gone.
there was no,
You
it
just
was
get
awful.
it done. So
So the weather
yeah,
was
tell us.
bad. It obviously wasn't like kind of a particularly bad storm, but I think the waves were sort of coming up and down a fair bit, and it's sort of the guy said to me afterwards that there were some awards or whatever, and he said you're probably in line for one of the toughest swims this year. So I think someone else got it, but it was not an easy swim, but it kind of it's never going to be like even if it was sunny. You speak to people who've done it in the sun, and they're dealing with actually overheating and sunburn and all those kinds of things. So you can probably never win.
And so when you finished, elation or just
Uh, Sort of big relief. And
yeah,
it's this weird thing. Like I climbed up onto a rock, and he sort of told me not to, but I was like, I'm going to climb out here because you got this far. And so you're pushing yourself out, and then you kind of go back, and he'd come in a dinghy because the main boat couldn't get that far. So then pull myself back onto the dinghy, then you jump back out, then you push yourself back onto the boat. How the hell I was lifting like pushing my body out the water that says because within like 30 seconds I couldn't even lift my arm over my I couldn't lift my arms at all. I think it was like relief and then just like sheer pain.
yeah.
Like there's just my arms were in so much pain at the end of it. It was kind of that sort of thing like how it, not just me. I think the human body is incredible how you can kind of get it to do certain things, and I think it's big time about this. The mind just switching off. So there was kind of just you couldn't afterwards for a while. It's just about like a balance of tiredness and pain, like which one took over the most. So sometimes it's too painful to sleep. Sometimes I was too tired to feel the pain. So you just kind of yeah. But really, it kind of didn't sink into quite a lot later. It was quite a big challenge, kind of ticked off. So I think you don't really process it properly for a while.
And was there anything like jellyfish? Any issues when you were going across? Did you get stung? Did you
Yeah,
swim with fish?
I got one jellyfish like square on, and so I was
Yeah,
wearing a hat, but it kind of like stung me sort of down the side of the face and everything. But it wasn't drastic. And then otherwise it was a quiet swim. Yeah,
yeah.
people sort of see dolphins and seals and sort of all sorts of dicey stuff. And yeah, mine was fairly calm in that respect. Just headbutt the jellyfish.
And did you see or notice any boats? Or
I didn't notice any of them. There's a nice picture of me sort of at night with the moon behind a big sort of shipping, whatever they are, tanker sort of thing, and then me there. It looks close, but it wouldn't be particularly close at all. And it's one of, if not the busiest shipping lanes in the world. So there are lots of boats around. But again, that's back to safety point. That kind of boat you're with helps navigate that, and you are safe.
yeah. So how long did it? Anything else you want to tell us about the swim before we get on to how long it took to recover and lessons learned?
Um, No, I think the big thing was just that it was so different to what I expected. But I think the preparation was good. It wasn't perfect, but I had enough miles and kind of the belt to kind of know I could get through this. Even when I hit that surprise after 5 hours, I no, I know I can do this. Why? It's almost if I'd have had that shock at 7 hours, I'd have probably been thinking more because I'd never swum longer than six. Um, But I think it was kind of one of those things
And
you just switch off.
it was just different because you had a sort of picture in your mind's eye of
Yeah.
what it should
Yeah,
look like,
you
and the
can't
sensation.
help but imagine it the whole time. And every single training session I did, I imagined that last pull being like, oh, I touched the seabed.
Yeah,
As you kind of get to, and so I was imagining touching sand. That was kind of
yeah.
that sort of thing I was clinging on to, and ultimately that never happened, which is a shame. But it didn't impact me too much. But it was very, very different swim.
So just expect. So if someone was going to do this, expect that it may not look like the picture in your mind's eye.
Yeah, imagine it to be way worse and kind of just double it. Just imagine it's just not a pleasant experience for 13 plus hours. And I think that probably about cuts it.
And how long did it take to? So you said your arms were absolutely shot to bits. How long did it take for it to sort of for you to recover, for you to feel normal again? Think sort of tiredness and also like muscle fatigue. How were you the
It was
next day? How long did it take you to?
so I started a new job fairly shortly afterwards. I think I was on a call the next day with some guys in Australia with this new company I was working for, and I was good for nothing. Literally, I went on the call just like, it was kind of not one like
Yeah,
this. And I don't know how I managed that. I think I was out of it for like a week at least. Just sort of like you're really feeling it. Obviously, you recover the initial stages quite quickly and quite significantly, but really, really feeling it for at least a week. And I don't think I swam for months.
yeah.
I
Well, I
just
mean, actually,
didn't
when
want
I
to.
stopped playing rugby, I didn't. It's probably the same thing, isn't it? You
Yeah,
just when I stopped playing rugby, I didn't even watch rugby for about 2 years. So
yeah.
I had no interest in it. I would assume it's similar to you, just like right, I'm done with that for a bit. I'm just gonna draw a line under it, and maybe I'll get back to it in a bit.
Yeah, I mean, totally. And you inevitably talk about it a lot with it kind of being a sort of big challenge and raising money for charity and all that sort of stuff. But like, you sort of didn't want to talk about it that much, and definitely didn't want to swim. It was kind of you want. I did. Everyone's different, but for me, I just wanted to put it to one side.
Yeah, and because you said you did it for charity, but that wasn't your sort of initial. Which charities did you do it for? And but it wasn't your initial sort of plan.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was a good opportunity to raise quite a lot of money. So I raised just over 20 grand for Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, kind of separately. So shared it between the two of them. Those were causes that were quite close to my family's hearts. That wasn't the reason I did it. The kind of reason I did it was fairly kind of, but I just needed a big challenge, not that big, in hindsight, but kind of needed something to fill the kind of rugby void. So, but I do think the whole charity thing kind of one, it's a great opportunity to if you're doing something that large, it captures people's imagination and that type of thing. So you do end up getting some great donations, which was amazing, and that is a great way of kind of doubling down and buying you in. If there's any doubt, like I say, we go back to thinking about those donations. I can't give up.
Yeah.
So
So
yeah,
if someone was to come to you and say, "I'm going to do it," what would your top three bits of advice be, or any lessons that you've learned?
I'd probably end up having a similar conversation to the one that I said Matt had with me. You kind of want to test the reason why someone's doing it. Because I think I probably went into it a little bit sort of glibly, which wasn't a bad thing in the end. But I would just say don't underestimate it at all. But if you've thought about it for a while and you want to do it, and you've got this kind of itch about it, give it a go. I really think far more people can do it than kind of give themselves credit for. And swimming, like we said earlier, is one of those sports where suddenly you do kind of a bit longer and a bit longer and a bit longer. The next thing you know, you're doing something that's more than credible in terms of contributing towards that training towards channel swim. So if you want to do it, if you've got that kind of itch to scratch, just give it a go. And the big thing is booking the boat, and it's kind of looking into what it kind of takes. I think the major thing that kind of it was really hard. It's not pleasant at all. It's not glamorous, and none of the training is glamorous either. Swimming in the sea, getting into cold water all the time, swimming for hours on end, multiple days a week, and having to travel a reasonable distance for it, it has a massive impact on your life. Your family life and everything else. And I think it's one thing that you've almost got to look at that. Have I got the spare capacity to do this? Yes, you might want to do it, and yes, you might need a kind of challenge, but this is one that just takes up. I don't know about other stuff that's similar, but it takes up a ridiculous amount of your time and energy
So
as well.
what though? How much? So last month's worth of training, say, what sort of time were you putting into it? Because I think this is important for people to know,
Yeah.
right? Because you can't just, you can.
I sort of didn't really follow the guideline. I didn't really swim a huge amount in the last month because my swim got delayed as well. So I'd actually barely swum in that last month. I was just taking over. But the month before, I reckon I did like 50 or 60K of swimming. Kind of some of it in the sea, some of it in was it in the pool? No, I think all of it would have been the sea. So you're thinking about the journey times to there. You're swimming for an hour to 3 hours at a time as well. Then the journey time back. and doing that like 3 times a week, it's a huge amount of time. You're sort of talking a half day, 3 days a week, and you've got to fit that in and around work and being a good kind of dad, wife, whatever it might be. It's kind of, we didn't have kids at the time, and I just don't think it would be possible now, or it would be, but not without huge sacrifices.
Yeah. Is there anything like you wish you knew before you started? So when you finished, is there anything you wish you knew before you started?
Yeah, we talked about the weather and the conditions and that type of thing. I kind of wish I'd known it was going to be like that because I could have prepared myself a bit more mentally for it. I wish I'd known how it felt to not have like a full kind of home team on the boat. If you know what I mean? Like I have my wife there and I have Matt, who I knew pretty well, but like it would have been good to kind of, some other people recruited kind of friends or like, the equipment yourself. Like, actually, this is going to sound like a marketing plug, but like get your S&C coach on the boat with you for that type of thing, because if you trained with someone and they put together your program and that type of thing, they're going to understand how you react to it better than anyone else. And that's kind of nice. It's really nice to have someone home team on the boat, sort of just someone that can understand you a little bit better. And that's something, if I did it again, I would probably assemble a bigger team on the boat.
Right. Awesome.
There you go. Should have had you there.
Huh?
Should have had you there. I'll be there when you do it.
Yeah, right. Well, actually, I remember when you said, I remember putting a couple of swims up on Strava, and you were saying, "Channel swim." I'll be honest, it's not for me as yet, and I don't think my life would allow it, frankly. But yeah, maybe one day.
There are a lot of, it's a real range of ages, and I just don't know how, looking back to the kind of group I sort of trained with here and there, and it wasn't like all the time, but I don't know how some of them managed it, either from an age perspective, or just like stuff you got going in your life. The older you get, the harder it is to find the time to do these things.
Yeah.
But
anything else you fancy doing in the near future, or are you just dadding and working for a bit?
dadding and working, trying my best. I think everyone assumes that you're going to be some like endurance athlete afterwards, and you kind of what's next. Like,
Get the bug.
Yeah, I do not have the bug. Like just anti endurance events. I mean, very occasional. The problem is the train that goes into it and kind of the impact that has in your life. If I could do something which I could sort of book in a few weeks' time that just tested my resilience, I'd love to do it. But you can't do any of the things without a huge amount of buy-in on the training side. It's just not possible. So, yeah, I just think it's not for me at the moment. You never know. One day.
One day. Well, mate, look, that's super interesting. I think if anyone is planning or thinking about doing it, that would be hugely valuable to hear sort of what you've done, your lessons learned, how you trained. So, mate, really appreciate having you on.
Pleasure. Good to speak.
All right, mate, I'm just going to shut off the recording.